My brother is a pianist and a composer. I like his work. Uh, how are we going for internet access today? It's looking stable. It's saying I've got stable internet. Hooray. Welcome to any of my regular viewers who like to tune into the show. I'm going to be talking about, I don't know how to pronounce it, Wakusha and willful Republican mismanagement. So the idea of withholding resources from people out of a united desire to teach them a lesson. I'm from Australia and initially, and some people might be wary of Australians saying things are better where we are. I'm not saying that today. We don't often have free or reduced price lunch available in schools. Your parents just pack you lunch and it is what it is. So I've never been in an environment where I've noticed anybody else go hungry. But I did see a New Zealand ad once showing, or a portion of a documentary in which the camera panned around some desks. The children had left their school lunch on their desks, and there were quite a few desks where there was nothing, and there were other desks where the lunch was simply a small packet of chips. And if that's the case, then it is unfortunate. And that's a big if. I'm saying if, but there are children whose parents earn such low wages or earn so little and have so little that they are expected to be in a learning environment with other children and yet have inadequate nutrition for that task. And that affects learning for all children. So the consequence of saying we're with hey Pablo, hey Kim, nice to see you, very glad you caught me. But the consequences of withdrawing the options to have free or subsidized food, the options to all share together in a meal, that's something really nice. And the consequences for withdrawing it might mean more hungry, ashamed children whose behavior is harder to manage. It's harder to control yourself when you're irritable and tense and hungry and undernourished. So there's that. And I point to that as a bigger picture of something to draw attention to, because the federal government has supplied a lot of emergency funds to all American states. But in Republican governed states, a lot of that assistance money is being withheld for the naked purpose, well, it's not really naked, the secret agenda of messing things up in order to undermine the Biden administration, in order to cause chaos and unhappiness in the knowledge that when American people are frustrated and miserable, they often then reflexively vote against whoever's in power. Because they're miserable, maybe they will use their vote to fix that. That's just an automatized response that's common, but it's particularly common amongst people who already lean towards a conservative outlook, that of saying, well, government's bad, doesn't help me anyway, might as well get rid of it. My children are playing in the basement, which is nice. Kim is saying in her area there were free lunches for all kids during COVID. That's really nice. What about you, Pablo, Los Angeles? Were there programs to supply kids with food even when COVID had closed schools? The bigger question around schools at the moment in relation to COVID is more than free lunches and helping to subsidize those people who've been left out of the livable wage strata. So there's wages you can live off, and then there's the untenable $7 an hour that's still the case for so many American workers, the working poor. And if you put it to someone, well, that makes life untenable for a whole strata of American society. Their suggestion, as my neighbor's was yesterday, is for them to get another job. Whereas the social mobility options of someone whose base wage is so low, $7 an hour or less, that they can only exist by holding down 3 jobs. They can only keep a roof over their head, keep food on the table by holding down so many jobs that they don't have the free time to invest time in their education. They don't have all money. They don't have the free time to invest in their family's education. They can't readily help children with their homework or just even take an interest in their children's education, because parental interest and involvement is a powerful motivator, and people who've ever worked with human beings or children will know that positive reactions are something. Pablo's area says, yes, they were doing free food drives, but the city or the school district might have organized it. Thanks for sharing, Pablo. Kim is impressed with the schools in her area. Masks required, social distancing required, food brought to class, and plexiglass too. Yes, although plexiglass in the context of a airborne communicated disease where fine droplets can move and circulate very thoroughly around a room, the key word we're looking for, aside from masks, is ventilation, is a method for introducing lots of air circulation into a room, because then the air exchange rate means that those particles are whisked away as soon as they're emitted by someone who may be asymptomatically contagious or symptomatically contagious and their parents have sent them to school anyway. In Florida today, there was a tragedy of a Floridian teacher who had cancer, and so his or her immune system was too compromised to be vaccinated, and they died of COVID today, or at least it's being reported today. Maybe we'll have a look at that reporting in a moment. I might not have touched on this yet, so let me touch on the matter of the tragic suicide bombing yesterday at Kabul airport. I know a lot of the left people who show up in my Twitter feed are saying that they're frustrated with what they feel is glee on the part of the mainstream reporters who have been engaging in a frenzy of denunciation of the Biden administration, as if to burnish their own credentials of being so impartial, so removed from political loyalties, that they're perfectly willing to criticize Joe Biden just as much as they criticized Donald Trump, even if the grounds for criticism in the case of Biden are much more flimsy, because of course a 20-year war is ending. It's not pretty, and it's awful and sad. And now with the deaths of 12 Marines, it's additionally tragic and sad. But the broader context is that a Republican president initiated that war, and there was public support for finding the people who helped perpetrate the 9/11 terrorist attacks against the American people and against American institutions. There was public support for that, but along the way, the Afghanistan war also morphed into acquiring a second agenda, that of a nation-building program to build a flourishing democracy in the teeth of Islamic religious extremism, as if to prove that you could paper over the factors, the long-standing factors for conflict in the region. And of course, even before George H.W. Bush, apparently as far back as Ronald Reagan, troops were sent in. Laptop plugged in for power. Why is it in battery saver mode? Maybe I pulled the plug out. I did pull the plug out, so I've got to fix that. Hang on. I pulled the plug out now. Let's see if I can attach this here. I've moved the location of my computer because people pointed out that when I had the window behind me, the rules for photography Kim is noting that behind you, put it in front. That story will drive fear into the hearts of parents, particularly if those parents engage with reality, because not all parents do. There's some parents who are quite fervently inhabiting a bubble right now. But the unfortunate big picture point here is that this is going to massively undermine public education. I hope that it doesn't. I hope that it goes to illustrate how potent an advocate for children schools can be, school organizers, school boards when they're not infiltrated by QAnonies or white supremacists who, whether they know it or not, derive at least some of their support for anti-vaccination, anti-mask agendas from a compulsion to ethnically cleanse the United States. That on some level, whether they recognize it or not, they've noticed that at least in the first year of the pandemic, Black Americans and Hispanic Americans and people of color were dying in disproportionate numbers, in part, no doubt in large part, due to their overrepresentation in public-facing essential jobs, but also in large part as well due to disparities in terms of access to healthcare. So the fact that Black people are often gate-kept out of the type of privileged white-collar jobs where you can work from home, but also the government indirectly subsidizes your healthcare because your employer delivered healthcare insurance plan is a tax deduction for your company, meaning the government subsidizes your healthcare in your cushy, nice paying job. Not cushy, but your well-paying job. And those jobs are often have HR managers who, whether consciously or unconsciously, perpetuate and extend systemic racism in America by just deciding that Black people are not a good fit for organizations and declining to interview people with Black sounding names, or interviewing Black candidates but just feeling that they won't be a good culture fit. Someone says, hello from Skane. Skane? Sounds European, particularly with the European mark over the A. Kim notes that the pain of anti-vaxxers' cognitive dissonance is causing craziness and violence. Will they join reality? I am doubtful. Well, that's a very good point, Kim. I was told a story. I was told a story of a woman who was persuaded to bed share via exposure to naturalistic mothering literature that tends to be a little bit doused in naturalistic fallacy of if it's natural, it's good. So cots are unnatural, they're a man-made creation, but for millennia, women have just snuggled up to their babies. Maybe for millennia they did, but more modern folks sleep on cushy mattresses with maybe a deeper sleep and maybe drink more or take more pills and are able to achieve levels of unconsciousness in their sleep that makes them more likely to roll over or roll onto a little baby. So this woman inadvertently caused the death of her own child. And her grief from that event didn't lead to her wanting to tell people, don't share a bed with your babies or be aware of the risks of bed sharing with your infants. She instead fell deeper into the embrace of the hippie-leaning faction, who persuaded her that the true cause of her infant's death was not being smothered by an adult who didn't keep to their own side of the bed, but was in fact vaccines. And she became an anti-vaccination activist as something to do with her energy and her pain and her grief. And I've always wanted to hope for people suffering, that they're able to turn their sad feelings into purposefulness. But that's a really negative example of someone turning their negative emotions into purposefulness, but in a harmful direction, in a direction that actively undermines public health, because when you don't vaccinate your children, you're bringing down the vaccination rate, which is working to lower the efficacy of vaccinations, because vaccinations work not just on an individual basis, they work at a collective level, because when there is 90% vaccination rates for some diseases, that means there are so few hosts for the disease to circulate amongst that the disease can't flourish and is effectively eliminated from that community. But if the vaccination rate falls even to 85 or 80%, the rate that you need for herd immunity varies in relation to the reproductive rate or the transmissibility of the whatever disease or virus it is. So that one individual woman suffering the grief of loss of a child, using her pain to cause other people pain. That's not the best example of human nature, but the thing with humans is we have amazingly variable capacity for good or harm. Someone made a meme that said the human brain is capable of so many amazing things. It can invent a vaccine, and it can also construct a rationalization for consuming horse paste instead of taking the vaccine. And that is something people have been marveling about, which is these Facebook groups with 25,000 members, where people are sharing tips on how to best consume anti-parasitic horse and sheep medication that they're purchasing direct from veterinary outlet supply chains, because the organization that pushed ivermectin, America's frontline doctors, the pro-Trump group of doctors that first touted the benefits of hydroxychloroquine, they've dropped saying hydroxychloroquine is a curative treatment for COVID, and they have started to say anti-parasitic horse paste is good. You can get human medications for it, but they charge you $90, and they also partner with pharmacies to then bill you the $90 and then set you up with a home delivery service for ivermectin. But because they've been so overwhelmed with demand, imagine there were 71 million Trump voters, a large portion of them, maybe 50%, are opposed to the vaccine, whether they know it or not, out of a type of contrariness that was cultivated and fostered and indulged and furthered by Donald Trump. So out of loyalty to something that Donald Trump grew in them, that already existed at some level, but Donald Trump grew this anti-establishment contrarian tendencies. He reinforced it, he validated it, he made it their thing. And now they can't get a vaccination because their identity is so caught up in rationalizing away all the arguments to get a vaccine, all the take care of each other, protect the people who can't be vaccinated, protect children. They rationalize all of that away as being a them argument. Doctors can't trust them. CDC can't trust them. Mainstream media can't trust them. They can only trust Trump and people who wear their Trump loyalty on their sleeves, like the charlatan group, America's Frontline Doctors, that have been so besieged by requests for prescriptions for anti-parasitic medication that now tens of thousands of people are in Facebook groups giving each other advice about how to consume horse paste purchased online in little packets that have pictures of animals on them. So these people who won't take or claim that their motivation for not taking the vaccine is suspicion and lack of knowledge as to what's in it are ingesting horse paste that is probably stripping their intestinal lining, because it is comical if you don't consider the tragedies of their children if they die, and you don't consider the burden that their increased rate of illness is on the healthcare system. So people who are giving themselves lifelong irritable bowel syndrome by consuming so much horse paste, so much ivermectin from veterinarian shops, that they think they are pooping out parasites, and what they are probably excreting is strips of their own intestinal lining. So maybe we should have a look at that. I'll just turn that off for a second. There are various people who have infiltrated some of the ivermectin groups. They did research and produced a story for, I think, NBC News. Oopsies. Okay. So let's have a look. This is Ben Collins. He's a reporter he's the apocalypse correspondent for NBC News. And he says, a lot of people have asked me this week, where did this ivermectin obsession come from? Who could possibly benefit from it? More importantly, why did my anti-vax aunt start eating horse goo from the tractor store? It's complicated, but here are some answers. First of all, they really are eating horse dewormer. It tastes terrible. Some mix it into jam to eat it on toast. Others have asked about more drastic actions. After all, they think ivermectin horse gel will save their life and their doctor won't prescribe it. How did we get here? So let's have a look. This first suggestion is, can I squeeze the paste into my anus instead of mouth? It tastes horrible. Someone replied, I seriously hope you're kidding, lol. Try using the human form, which comes in tablets and therefore no squeezing required. Someone says, fillable gel caps are cheap and easy to use. I don't want to read that part out. I don't want to give people advice on what to do, but I probably don't have that bigger pro-Trump, pro-horse paste audience, but you never know. Let's flash back to last year. Remember those pro-Trump doctors, who had an extremely viral video that said hydroxychloroquine cured COVID-19. Then President Trump retweeted it. TPT. Oh, I like that acronym for then President Trump. It had millions of views before it was pulled from Facebook. That was American Frontline Doctors. Oh, do you recognize that lady at the microphone? That is Dr. Simone Gold, who has been arrested and released on bail for being in the Capitol building, being part of the insurrection force that was there to validate Trump's narrative of a stolen election that required a patriotic uprising. So even if she herself did not beat police officers, she was participating in something that was an effort to negate democracy in America. That was an effort to use the magic of Donald Trump's deceitful storytelling skills that have lots of prep. If everybody remembers the preparation that Trump did prior to the election of warning his followers, warning America from his platform, that mail-in voting would be susceptible to fraud, even as people said mail-in voting is a very safe way. Many states vote entirely by mail, and it's been practiced by people in the military and many seniors for a long time. He told them mail-in voting wasn't safe, I believe specifically to increase the skew of votes so that people for whom Trump had no credibility, who chose to avail themselves of the method of mail-in voting because they were rationally afraid of an airborne pandemic, they would use mail-in votes, and they were more likely, because they distrusted Trump's assertions, first of all, that COVID wasn't serious, and secondly, that mail-in voting was rife with fraud. So they voted by mail. Do my children need me? And secondly, that people who did trust Trump and who would therefore distrust mail-in voting and be more likely to vote in person, and who wouldn't have concerns about COVID because they were assured that COVID was a overhyped creation of the left-leaning media and Democrats, and every COVID concern would vanish after the election was over on November the 4th. Those people were more likely to vote in person, and in-person voting was to be counted first, even ahead of early mail-in votes, thanks to a lot of Republican legislation in a lot of swing states, thanks to Republican control of the legislative state legislatures at the state level that passed legislation saying mail-in votes will be counted after in-person votes, so that Trump could have data points to strengthen his narrative of, I won, the votes were counted, all the legitimate votes were counted, and I clearly won. And then they were mysteriously counting at 4 a.m. still, and that's when they claimed that Biden won. Late at night, vote injections in mysterious suitcases. It's like they had some votes and they brought them in bins and suitcases. They transported the votes in and they counted them. And that's what happened. And 61 court cases covered the non-existent evidence that the unethical Trump-affiliated lawyers, Rudy Giuliani, what's her name? The blonde lady, Sidney Powell, and all the Kraken people, all of the stuff that got rolled out to say, oh, Trump really won the election. It was always flimsy. It was always just a distortion, claiming that legal things were illegal, claiming that mail-in voting was somehow unethical. And a lot of those people got savaged yesterday by Judge Parker, who castigated Giuliani, Sidney Powell, all of those Trump-affiliated people who took liberties with the law, who undermined the judicial profession, who undermined the law in the United States. But they did all that misconduct and crimes, and they've all been recommended for investigation and potential disbarment now, because everything they did was just to help give Trump more threads to spin his story, to try and create a veneer of legitimacy for his coup. So he pre-prepped the shit out of that coup by telling everybody mail-in voting was rife with fraud and would enable illegal immigrants to vote and would enable Democrats to cheat and would enable China, who he was attempting to villainize. Not that the Chinese government aren't villains, but he was still attempting to increase the degree in which they were villainized to the American public, because he preferred for that to be the focus rather than his very self-undermined credibility on COVID. Self-undermined credibility because he took two contrary positions on COVID. One, it's nothing, it's not a problem, it's all going to go away like a miracle in April. And then two, it's terrible, it's like a war zone, I'm like your war leader against an enemy of China, and you all hate me saying it's China because you all think racism is a thing, but clearly it's not a thing. There's no such thing as racism. There's only sensible thinking that always is deflecting to villains rather than ever giving you democratic accountability. Janet Ellis, thank you, Kim. Oh, Knowledge is here. Thank you, Knowledge. Nice to see you. Hello from Lynchburg City. Hello. Oh, and Kim says, I look lovely today, just the facts. That's awesome to hear, Kim. Well, you actually get to see me more because I have faced my laptop in a different direction. So the lighting is in my favor. And I washed my hair. That helps too. So I'm going to put your comment on screen just because I embrace compliments. Here we go back with Simone Gold, though, because I'm following this down. If you know America's frontline doctors, it's probably because of Dr. Stella Immanuel. She became famous because before claiming hydroxychloroquine cures COVID, she said ovarian cysts came from sex with demons, and Trump called her very impressive. So yes, that gave that lady a degree of infamy. America's Frontline Doctors was founded by Simone Gold, who spent the last year barnstorming churches and schools, insisting COVID vaccines cannot be trusted. She's become wildly influential with anti-vaxxers in the process. She has over 300,000 followers on this website. Why does Twitter still allow her to be on this platform? Clearly not enough of us have reported this woman yet. Knowledge says, great to see you too, and everyone else. Thank you, Knowledge. My internet connection still seems to be good. Is the internet, does anybody else sense an improvement? Because my husband did buy these little things, Wi-Fi extenders. So we'll see if it's better than normal. Over the last years, hydroxychloroquine failed to become the miracle cure that America's Frontline Doctors claimed. Anti-vaxxers became obsessed with COVID therapeutics. They're largely experimental cocktails from countries that didn't have but wanted vaccine access, and some included ivermectin. So the anti-vax groups on Reddit and Facebook wanted ivermectin, and doctors wouldn't prescribe it. Members did whack-a-mole with telehealth providers trying to get doctors to sign off on scripts, but one reliably obliged to speak with an MD who partners with, dun dun dun, America's Frontline Doctors, Simone Gold's organization. They offered $90 COVID consultations, and the cost of ivermectin or hydroxychloroquine isn't included, but conveniently they partner with a pharmacy who will ship it to your door. We got hold of the intake form for a speak with an MD doctor. One part of the questionnaire asks, what medication do you prefer? The user is then presented with 3 options, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, or not sure. Wow, it's a multiple choice. I'm just going to take myself out of the picture so you can see that. Oh, you still can't see the whole thing. But the 3 choices, the one you can see is the second, hydroxychloroquine. You can see the quin of that part because it's a little bit of a longer word than ivermectin. Knowledge did not accidentally block you. I think Alan might have blocked Knowledge. So I can see his comments. I'm given the option to universally, globally unhide them. But I still have to work out how to unblock everything, because somebody, I don't know specifically who, but somebody who I gave my trust to and appointed as a moderator has gone into the system and just blocked all of my, looks like most of my male followers. Fascinating and sexist. So things got out of hand fast. Speak with an MD now hits you with a prompt warning of long wait times due to overwhelming demand. So sad, like America puts up with so much litigation. People have been complaining about it to me all the time since I moved to the US a month and a half ago, saying we can't do this or we can't do this because we're afraid of being sued. Your children can't have a trampoline in the backyard because the landlord thinks that neighborhood children might jump on it and you might get sued as a consequence. And I like my landlord, but that's just a shame about the trampoline. And it's a shame that people feel so constrained by the fear of vexatious litigation. And yet there's nothing to protect Americans from people profiteering to this extent from unconscionable medical conduct, things that they should be struck off the board for. Prescribing ivermectin when there was one study that's been withdrawn from the paper it was published in because people noted that the authors were lying and misrepresenting outcomes. So this is how people started eating the horse goo. When cases ramp up in the fall and we don't have any approved treatments, I'll be ready to save as many people as I can. Oh, they've got it in both English and French. A lot of those boxes say on them, pâté oral pour chevaux, oral paste for horses. So knowledge has been encountering the same problem somewhere else. Anti-vaxxers started imploring each other to go to pet stores, claiming the horse and people ivermectin are the same. They started sharing tips on how to eat the gel kind. They started hoarding it. They started to wonder if maybe, without medical supervision, they had overdosed on it. Someone says, "Hello, everyone. I drank 20 mils of ivermectin. It's not that dangerous. I'm dizzy. I can't walk straight. Thank you." And somebody said, "Are you crazy? You can only drink 1 mil for every 50 kilograms of body weight." And someone else points out that is way too much, can cause liver damage. So that person who drank 20 mils of ivermectin in one go probably has sustained significant liver damage there. To evade what they believed to be Facebook and Reddit bans, some ivermectin fans started asking how much their horse weighs, so it didn't look like they were giving out medical advice. And this was an example of someone saying, "I identify as a horse and can report no ill effects from the directed dosage, as recommended by professionals taken on a weekly basis. I like mine with a side of strawberry jam." Weird. So that's how we ended up here. Ivermectin fans on Facebook complaining about wait times and high drug prices got fed up with America's frontline doctors who sold them both the conspiracy and the fake cure. So they went to the feed store to eat the horse goo because it's cheaper. And the final plot twist, of course, is that America's frontline doctors founder, Simone Gold, was indicted and is awaiting trial for her role in the Capitol riot on January the 6th. So she's out on bail, out on personal recognizance. She was on the speaker lineup for an anti-vax event in LA on Saturday. Did she go? That's her at the Capitol. She's speaking with a microphone in front of some famous painting. Looks like a famous painting in the Capitol building. And so that's the link to the story on NBC News if you want to read the full thing, nbcnews.com. And the headline is "Clamoring for Ivermectin, Some Turn to a Pro-Trump Telemedicine Website." So that was a long story to tell, but quite exciting. Oh. Let's see if that works. Now, why is Powell trending? Oh, because Jerome Powell said the Federal Reserve will start dialing back its ultra-low interest rate policies this year as long as hiring continues to improve, Chair Jerome Powell said, signaling the beginning of the end of the Fed's response to the pandemic recession. So that's the Reserve Bank. That means Joe Biden's policies really have helped turn America's economic woes around, as Democratic presidents are often forced to do at a legislative sense, through the legislative branch, through the executive branch, after Republicans have been in power and have ruined things. So that's good news for Biden. Powell is also trending because the disciplinary arm of the State Bar of Texas will hold an investigatory hearing on the fate of pro-Trump attorney Sidney Powell's law license, kicking off a process that could result in her being sanctioned or disbarred. Well, good. And a judge in Florida, this is nice, concluded that Florida law does not support a statewide order or any action interfering with the constitutionally provided authority of local school districts to provide for the health and safety of children based on the unique facts on the ground in a particular county. So, I mean, Ron DeSantis probably doesn't mind that much. The evidence submitted by the defendant, which is the state, I think reflects a minority, perhaps even a small minority, of medical and scientific opinion. It's nice because the medical opinion of a minority isn't really a medical opinion. It's a politically motivated line of sabotage to say you can't make masks mandatory, which undermines the hard work of the children who keep masks on their faces all day. It's not just a question of, oh, well, let them jeopardize their own health. They're not. Parents who oppose mask wearing and who get away with there being no mask mandates in school because of the injudicious, murderously negligent, homicidal activity of Republican governors who are trying to get on the good side of Trump supporters in advance of they're sabotaging the efficacy of masks. Masks are more effective when everybody wears them, or at least 80 or 90% of people wear them, because it reduces transmission. If your child is the only child wearing a mask in a room full of unmasked children, your child's mask is providing no protection, or anything's better than nothing, but very little protection, because the potential level of viral particles in a room full of people, particularly in an area of high transmission, is vaccinated high transmission is very high. And there's a lot of high transmission in Florida right now. I think it's probably still leading the nation in new cases. Now, my friend Brian pointed out to me yesterday that if I was able to use HAPS technology to schedule a broadcast before I actually do it, then that would probably increase the number of viewers. So I'll work on doing that before the next broadcast. So maybe people get, I don't know how it works, but maybe people get an alert that there's going to be a broadcast on a certain day at a certain time. So I could even do that when I sat down to the computer, because I usually sit down and do a bit of reading before I go live. So if I sit down, schedule a broadcast in half an hour, and then broadcast, that might really work. And I might liaise with how to achieve that. But I'm happy, at least for the people of Florida, that mask mandates have been allowed by Judge Cooper. Do we think that Ron DeSantis will fight it in court? He might, because every fight he engages with raises his profile. And it raises his profile in a way that elevates his standing with Trump supporters, because Trump supporters are contrarian supporters, anti-establishment supporters. So I'm just also keeping one ear open to my children who are playing with a friend in the basement. So yes, oddly enough, Republican governors exercising extreme government overreach are using that to burnish their credentials as anti-liberal, and it highlights the lack of principle behind their opposition to big government, because that was quite big government of Ron DeSantis to ban mask mandates in the state of Florida. And I think for white people, we should pay attention to to a pattern that is probably more readily noticed by Black people who have experience in identifying white people. So the white people bullshit is that they oppose big government out of principle, whereas the secret principle is oppose big government that has advanced civil rights, oppose big government, get control of institutions that have facilitated the desegregation of schools, that have facilitated granting the vote, enfranchising Black people in the United States, passing the 19th Amendment to enfranchise white women in the United States. It's the history. It's the 101, is it the 100th year history of women white women gaining the right to vote in the United States, and that's celebrated. But yes, it's not okay to just leave it as women got the vote, because of course black women in the United States still did not have the ability to avail themselves to that type of power, and more people had to suffer for more decades before the civil rights heroes could grow the momentum, could suffer enough in public, could be sufficiently martyred by the attack dogs of racists, could put themselves forward enough so that they to make it more visible, the suffering that they endured quietly and individually in their homes and communities. They marched on the bridge in Selma to bring the fight forward, so that the most racist people of all and the most racist people in the police force felt that they had to counter that protest with attack dogs and batons and breaking the skulls of John Lewis and other people. That had to happen for the photographs to then be circulated to the American people, for the American white people to wake up from their apathy and their ability to tolerate persecution and oppression of black people as part of a acceptable status quo. Sometimes it takes that much suffering for people to change. It's up to white people to try and say, can we just get the change, please, without the suffering? Or at least, can we make use of the suffering that cultivate acceptance, to cultivate political support for good, necessary things, to reduce injustice, increase justice, and in the case of schools and COVID right now, to reduce the capacity of white Republican leaders to continue with their efforts to ethnically cleanse America by perpetuating a pandemic that they know has disproportionately harmed people of color, that has disproportionately killed Black Americans, because that is ethnic cleansing. And we've heard the expression that there are some people who will cut off their nose to spite their face. Well, southern states right now are suffering cut noses and spited faces. Kim points out that only 30% of Americans lean towards regressive republicanism. Without dirty tricks, no Republican would ever win a seat. There's some places where Republican support is greater than 30%. It's just that Republican support is geographically concentrated in areas that are favored by the electoral college system and favored by the malapportionment of the Senate. So the fact that you get 2 senators from every state, regardless of how small the population size is, that favors low population, highly agricultural, high proportion of white racist farmers who are descendants of white racist farmers who used to make a fortune from the profits of farming when they had a free labor force of tragically enslaved. So people who have inherited the cultural legacy of entrenched racism, of entrenched desire to diminish and devalue Black people in order to justify white exploitation of those people and white wealth building at the expense of white oppressed Black people. That power is concentrated in the hands of senators who come from those small population states where their power is disproportionate to the population size of those states. So even though Republicans are lower in number, they're a relatively small, they're a smaller half of America. They're the smaller half, but also there are a lot of independent voters in America who might claim that they're not registered as either Republican or Democrat, but they still often vote Republican when they have been taught that whatever ills are happening to America are the fault of Democrats. And that is a function, or the easiness of hoodwinking independent voters in America is a function of the asymmetry in America's media system, where there is a flourishing pro-Republican media bubble in terms of Fox and right-wing radio, and there is no equivalent to that level of support for Democrats, even though people often mischaracterize mainstream media as being left. The mainstream media is most certainly left, and that is being very potently illustrated at the moment by the mainstream media's pro-war hysteria about what the end of a war looks like as Joe Biden ended or finished the process of withdrawing American troops from Afghanistan, which isn't pretty. And a decision was made to comply with the Afghan government's request to not evacuate too long before the deadline, because that could create a self-fulfilling prophecy of doom that could create a situation where the Afghan government collapsed because the Americans were showing a lack of confidence in the Afghanistani government holding. So they went, okay, we don't want to be responsible for that. We want to see what happens if we don't show that we have no confidence in the Afghanistani government. But of course, the Afghani president left the day after with suitcases of cash, I believe about $168 million. So he knew in his heart that yes, the Afghan government would collapse and the Afghan military would collapse, that they understood that collapse was inevitable given the Americans' withdrawal, and they had no interest in throwing their lives away and endangering the lives of their family members in a conflict where the outcome was pre-established, that the Taliban would win, that there wasn't going to be, that they were dependent on the support of Americans, and without American troops, without an American public willing to have ongoing loss of life and ongoing taxpayer expenditure in pursuit of a nation-building war that was always happening with a great deal of corruption and always happening in the context of an overall hostile nation, a nation that overall might have enjoyed the benefits of Western democracy intervention, might have enjoyed some of the stable influence of a democratic, allegedly somewhat democratic government that was less religiously extremist than the Taliban. They enjoyed the benefits of having women be able to attend school and enjoyed the injection of American taxpayer funds into their military and their various systems. But a lot of that was graft. There was a lot of corruption and misdirection of funds, and a lot of people willing to lie to Americans to say, yes, yes, everything's going swell. Of course, we'll be a self-sustaining democracy any minute now. Just keep giving us some more money and equipment. You know, that's a good idea. All right, I've been talking. How long have I been talking for? 53 minutes. That is close to an hour. And that is close to the maximum amount of time that I try to myself for broadcasting. So if you've enjoyed the show and have any suggestions on how to improve it, or if you ever want to be a guest on it or have suggestions for guests, do let me know. And if you want to write for a free newsletter that I'm going to try and create called The Call Out, which is going to be, people of any color can write for it, but the founding intention is for white people to be less tolerant of white misconduct and to bring color back into the picture, to the antithesis to that false claim that it's better to be colorblind. Because if you choose to be colorblind, that conveniently allows you to overlook a whole bunch of American history where there has been color-based persecution of Black people by white people, or Japanese people by white people, as well as the rest of the world where there has also been tribalistic, ethnic, national or color-based patterns of colonialism or persecution. Kim says she would love to write for me. Thank you, Kim. I'm writing your name down. Hashtag the call out. I'm really settling into our new home. We've been here for a week. The children get to start school soon, so I'm hoping to devote more time writing. I'm energized by the idea that people might want to write alongside of me. You can pick your own topic and write a paragraph on a topic of your choice. I'm putting that out there as an invitation to any of my regular viewers, and I'll try to do that myself, because you know what? Lots of people are doing that now on Substack, and I think we have something to say. And I think our very existence is an important counter to the weight of the status quo, the weight and inertia of the status quo in holding people back, just to say things are the way they are and you should accept that, otherwise you're a renegade rocking the boat. There's more appetite amongst young people to change things and to reform institutions. So us slightly older people, or much older people, if we recognize the problem, then we have a responsibility to raise our voices as well, especially considering the deluge of disinformation, of motivated tribalistic reasoning that is costing people their lives, costing children their educational opportunities, and costing businesses profits, and costing people their jobs. We need to add to the group of people calling out the progenitors of these harms. We need to call them out as effectively, as loudly, as vocally, as passionately as we can. And if you're happy to do that with me, I'm honored to labor alongside of you in making that happen. Thank you again. Thank you, Knowledge. Thank you so much, Kim, as well. And take care, everybody. Thank you, Cyber Grief, for watching as well. Anybody else who was here today? JB, your resident, thanks for dropping by. Pablo, thanks for dropping by as well. Take care, everybody. All the best, and talk to you soon.